I'm Saskia Epstein, Senior Vice President at PNC Bank, and PNC is a proud sponsor of the Boston Globe Summit. I'm thrilled to be here today. No other city could provide us with the experience that we are about to have, listening and learning from the most amazing panel of extraordinary women leading in media. These CEOs and publishers provide us with cultural content, the news, for our knowledge, for our business, for inspiration, for our happiness, and for our health. So thank you. I've had the pleasure of working with many of them and all of their organizations, and I can promise you we are in for a treat. Moderated by Janet Wu, a force in journalism herself, I turn it over to you. Thank you.
Go up.
I think so. Thank you so much. So as they take their seats, I want to let you know I did some research, and we are unlike any other city in this country where we have so many women at the top of our major media organizations. We have Margaret Lowe from Public Radio, Susan Goldberg from WGBH, Lynn Montesanto, who is the publisher of Boston Magazine, and of course, Linda Henry, who oversees Boston Globe Media. So I want to begin with a question for all of you. And that is basically how you got to where you are. Did you start wanting to be a writer or reporter, or were you always interested in the business of media? So Margaret, since you're sitting here.
Okay, I'll start. I'll try to be quick. I'll go back before I go forward. So I grew up 5 miles from here. My real claim to fame in public radio is that the car guys, Tom and Ray and Mayatsi, were actually my dad's mechanics. I loved the story in the Globe the other day about how the Dewey Cheatham Howe sign is going to stay up in Harvard Square forever. I didn't know what I wanted to do. First, as a kid, I wanted to be a horsewoman. Then I wanted to be an actor. Then in college, I really wanted an excuse to write, to avoid writing a paper for a class, and so I made a little documentary film. And that was sort of the moment that I understood, like, sort of the power of journalism and storytelling. Flash forward, I became an overnight production assistant at Morning Edition at NPR in Washington at the age of 23. It meant that you got up at midnight, got to work at 1 in the morning. I'm still happy to go to bed at night. I was there pretty much constantly for several decades, ended up running the news division and the work of 400 journalists across the country and around the world. Was lured away to the Atlantic, which was the first time I really was engaged in the intersection of journalism and business, and it was a great learning ground. And then I came to WBUR 4 years ago, just in time for a global pandemic.
Oh boy. Well, you have that in your background, and also I love that you work the graveyard shift. That's definitely cred. Susan, same question for you. What led you to where you are now?
Oh, thank you, Janet, and thank you for having me here today. I was the intern who got hired. I always wanted to be a reporter. I grew up during the time of the Vietnam War, and I saw how storytelling really was changing the course of the war because people were able to understand that what they were being told by the government was not what was actually happening on the ground. So I thought about the power of journalism from early on. It was all I ever wanted to do. And eventually, when I was in college, I made my way to the Seattle Post-Intelligencer between my junior and senior years. I was there for 8 weeks as the intern, and the editor came up to me and he said, "So kid, do you want to stay?" And oh, did I want to stay. So I said, "Yes, I do," but I had a phone call to make. I had to call my dad, who was a college professor, and say, "Pop, I am dropping out of college, and I'm going to stay at the Seattle Post-Intelligencer full-time as a reporter." And I made that phone call, and there was a silence, a very long silence on the phone. And then my father said the thing I least expected him to say. He said, "Good for you, Susan. We're very proud of you." And where he found that in him, I don't know, but I sort of feel like that's when my career started, that's when my real life started. And I just sort of went on from there, being a reporter, being an editor. I ran several large newspapers. I was the editor-in-chief of National Geographic and editorial director for 8 years. And then one day the phone rang and it was GBH, and now I'm here. So I've been here for 10 months.
I'm impressed by all the cross-platform experience. Lynn, did you always want to work in magazines?
No, I started my career in advertising. I thought that looked really fun and glamorous. And I was here in Boston. I was not in New York. And I did that for a number of years. And then when I had my children, I was in advertising leadership. So I was working a lot of nights and weekends on new business. So I was traveling, I wasn't around, and so that just didn't really fit my lifestyle. And so I really loved the magazine Fast Company. It was brand new at that time. I put it on every single media buy that I had. And so they had an opening for a sales position in the Boston office and asked if I would be interested in making that change. And I did, and I loved it. And would have stayed there forever, except that Wall Street Journal came knocking, and that seemed like a really great next opportunity for me. So I started there as a salesperson, rose to run the sales office there. I was there for 11 years, and absolutely loved it. And then kind of fate came into play here in that a friend of mine that I worked with at Fast Company became a recruiter in New York, and somehow he ended up with the assignment to find the publisher for Boston Magazine. So I was his first call. And so, again, it just felt like fate. Even though I was happy where I was like, I love Boston Magazine. I'd always read it, I'd subscribed to it. So that's how, I got to where I am. And that was a big leap. I wasn't, I didn't check every box in terms of qualifications, but they took a chance on me, and here I am 7 years later, still here.
Doing a great job.
Thank you.
Thriving.
Linda, I sometimes feel that you have the most challenging, the most exciting, in some ways the best, and in some days the worst job that you have here, because you are so embedded in the community, you have to cover the community, and everyone is always watching. So were you always intrigued by journalism before you came to the Globe?
First, I just want to say I'm so thrilled to be with all four of you today. Thank you. This is it's really exciting, and thank you all for joining. My passion is really cities. I grew up in an immigrant family where my dad built a family business around real estate, and so I worked in real estate in all different aspects, and it sort of became interesting, and I went into urban studies and understanding what made a city work. And I feel, for my father, who came here as a poor immigrant, was able to build a successful life here in Boston. And so I've had this passion of how do we make Boston a place where more people can thrive. And so I've put a lot of my energy and passion into Boston in different ways, and how can this city and region work. And in all of the different places that I've been very fortunate to get involved with, I think that at the core of it is a well resourced, trusted, and robust newsroom at the heart of a city is really one of the things that most makes a city successful. So I feel so lucky. You mentioned all the emotions, but at my core, I feel truly lucky that I get to work in a place where I truly believe it is the best thing I can do to support this sort of larger vision that I have, this larger mission, personal mission I have, is to support this city. And so having a strong, trusted newsroom, all of each of these women on the stage with me contribute to as well. We have the largest newsroom in New England by far. And in cities that have a strong, trusted newsroom, more people vote, more people show up for office, there's more trust in institutions. People know, institutions know that there is a really strong, capable newsroom there at the heart of it. So I feel very lucky. So no, it didn't start in journalism, but it came to be that journalism is what helped me fulfill.
Also, I think there's a benefit that people don't always realize to have local ownership of a newspaper, because that is becoming less and less common. And when you live here and you cover the city, there are challenges, but there are also great benefits. Linda, I want to stay with you for a minute because you and the Globe sort of represent the future of journalism, and part of it is necessary. It is no longer just a newspaper. It is also websites and a magazine and events and such. Is that necessary in order to survive these days?
Yes, it really is. It's tough. I've been there 10 years now. In October will be my 10th anniversary. And the media, as we're all going through, it's hard. And we knew it was hard. It was actually harder than I thought it would be, but we've gotten to this place where we have, as all of you have, you just keep investing and finding new and better ways to serve our readers. We are just constantly trying to find ways to be better at what we do, find new ways to meet people, cover areas that maybe aren't covered in the way that they want. And so to do that, we have to meet them in the platforms where they are. We have a television show.
Yeah.
We have podcasts. We have newsletters, and sort of all of these things where at the heart of it, of all that we do, is this really strong, trusted, independent journalism, and then put it in the flavors that reach and serve our community.
And it's great because it does serve to bring people together. I'm looking out in our audience and I see leaders that I know personally in all sorts of different industries, beer, technology, everything. But also we have thousands of people joining us, and they are perhaps at their jobs doing different things, but we're finding a commonality here. I also want to point out that through the years, we have heard about the impending death of things, newspapers dying. Let's talk about radio. For many, many years, radio is dying. We actually have here 2 women leading radio stations, and you represent something unique to Boston, and that is we are a city that can support multiple public radio stations. So for Susan and Margaret, I want to ask you about, first of all, the challenges of keeping a ship like this healthy and also growing. So Margaret, you first.
So I agree, first of all, with everything you describe and what a news organization or a media company has to do today to be vibrant. It's funny. I try to avoid using the word station or radio station because in some ways it doesn't capture the full vibrancy of what we do, like the Globe, like GBH, like Boston Magazine. We do events, we have podcasts, we have newsletters. The digital age is daunting, right? There's technological disruption. There's a war on truth. So much of the advertising has gone to the platforms, and they have no relationship. The platforms being Google or Twitter or Facebook, who have no relationships to local communities, and we all have a relationship to our local community. It's hard because there is a structural decline in broadcast, right? There are just fewer people listening to what we call, I don't know if you call it this too, but less linear listening. And yet we still have to invest in that because our core audience, so many in our core audience is there, and they love us and they rely on us. And yet at the same time, we have to invest in everything else, from podcasts to other platforms. So it is a daunting task. But it is also, in a city like Boston, as you said, that can support 2 public radio stations with deeply, deeply loyal audiences who have learned how to give decades ago, right? They give because they believe in us. And that's, in some ways, unique to public radio. They don't have to, but they do.
And Susan, I want to ask you the same question, because you actually have partnerships that result in things that are seen around the world, across the Atlantic and such. And again, we are one of those rare cities that does a lot of support for public television.
Right. I mean, the GBH is a dual licensee, so we are on the radio side, and I use those air quotes, and we are on the television side. But what we really do is we are a multi-platform media organization creating local, national, and even international content. And we're doing it the way all of these organizations are across all platforms to meet our audiences where they are and how they expect to get information and how they want to get information. There are so many challenges in this digital transformation, not the least of which is a financial challenge. Getting, our work on these digital platforms paid for the way they are on linear television and terrestrial radio. But there's also enormous opportunity to reach larger and more diverse audiences than we have ever been able to reach. When I ran a newspaper, when I ran a big magazine, those were great experiences, those lean back, touch it experiences. But I could only reach the people who literally had it in their hand. Now we can reach people everywhere, and that is true for everyone on this stage. And it is such an opportunity to make a difference with the information that we put out.
And Lynn, again, the magazine is not something that is just going to be in your hand as a magazine. You've also realized that need to find new ways to be in the community. What is the magazine doing?
So yeah, we obviously are facing that challenge of same thing, like our name is Boston Magazine. So, everyone just assumes that's all we are, but we are doing the exact same thing as everybody else. Our print circulation is around 55,000 readers right now. And we have 50,000 opt-in subscribers to our newsletters, almost 200,000 Instagram followers. We have 1 million plus people visiting our website, unique visitors every month, and then, I don't know, about 4,000 people come to our events. So we are so much bigger than the magazine at this point. So, the biggest challenge I think right now, and I'm sure you guys can agree, is my org chart. Like, how do you hire and stuff? Because our revenue hasn't changed. Like, we just found other ways to keep our revenue at where it was, but our expenses are so much more because you are having to have people service all these different platforms where back in the day, it was just print. So I think that's a real challenge.
I have another question that I'd like to ask all of you. I'm going to ask Linda first in this round, and that is, what makes the Boston audience unique? Be it the listener, the reader, the attendee, what makes Boston different?
I talk to news organizations across the country, and we're really lucky because we have a very, very smart, educated, passionate audience here in Boston that cares. And what we do doesn't matter if you don't have a citizenry that cares about their community or about the world. And so you can turn on music, or you can tune in and read and attend and show up and learn more and connect with the community that you're in. So I would say that when talking to other news organizations, that we have a larger print, we have more digital subscribers than the LA Times, and we're a very small percentage of their demographic, but we have instead a really powerful, plugged-in, caring city.
And I also want to point out something else that you probably don't think about, but before a newspaper would go to bed, it would literally be printed, everyone would go to bed. The Boston Globe, you'll see stories posted and news breaking at 1:30 in the morning, 2 in the morning. It's a different business, so it's gotten more challenging. We're quickly racing through time, so I'm going to fold in another aspect to the same question that I wanted to ask you about the audience. As I said, I did some research. New York Times, New York Magazine, LA Magazine, NYPR, NPR, Southern California Public Radio. I'm trying to cover all of your industries, LA Times, all of these, Washington Post, they have male editors-in-chiefs, male publishers. The publisher has the financial and the business headaches as well as, keeping the ship righted. I want to ask you, if you can, just tell me, why do you think we have so many women leading media here in Boston?
I don't know if I have an exact answer. I actually think it's, in some ways, it's just good fortune, right? And I think there's a recognition that women actually lead differently than men, and so there's an attraction, I think, to bringing women in because they both have the business sophistication, the editorial sophistication, and sort of the head and heart of what it means to run an organization and to think deeply about culture and people. I mean, we always say, in our effort to make WBUR a magnificent place to work or an exceptional place to work, that without the people, we're nothing. And so I think women are good at that.
Same thing, because it's a hard business, right? When you choose to go into this line of work, it's hard. You have to keep the employees feeling mission-driven and happy.
Oh, anything worth doing is hard, is what I've always thought. But I think it's sort of happenstance that we are at this moment where you have this situation. But what I've really been struck by is how many women are not just leading in Boston, but leading across the state, right? You've got the governor and the lieutenant governor, and you've got the president of Harvard, and you've got the head of the Fed here, and the list goes on and on of women who are doing amazing things around here. And I don't know why exactly. Is it because people here are so smart and interested, or did it just happen? But I really have been struck that this is a place with so many women leaders, and I don't think that people outside of this area have keyed in on that. I think it's a really good national story, actually.
Lynn, let me ask you about the pipeline because, again, we need more talent coming in. I often recall that when I graduated from college, I got the award of having the lowest starting salary, and my salary was below some of the bonuses that some of my fellow graduates had. Plus, I had to go to like a place that no one had ever heard of before. But I did say, if I have to work for this, I'm going to be someplace beautiful. So I went to Monterey, California. But Lynn, you have, tell me about the pipeline of people coming in, because if they want to be a magazine reporter, they want to be a radio reporter, it's for their passion. It's not going to be
That's
for the money.
exactly right. We're a family-owned business too. Like, we're owned by the family that owns Philadelphia Magazine, so we're really, really small. Like, a lot smaller than you would think based on the things that we put out there. And like Liz Ferguson knows because she's worked there. So that creates a challenge. So we don't pay as well as some bigger organizations do, but people have a real passion for Boston Magazine, right? Whether they got it in their home when they were younger or their families won a Best of Boston award. There's no city like Boston in terms of making that known that they've won that award, right? There are people on Charles Street, there's an antique store that has the plaque from 1996. It's an antique, but they have it up there because they won it once. And because I work with all these city regional magazine people, and I'll just say to anyone we're talking to, take a walk around Boston, walk one block, and I challenge you not to run into a Best of Boston sign.
Yeah.
So that's why people want to work for us.
We have a great audience question that relates to the next question I was going to ask Linda, and that is, in addition to expanding what we know as the Boston Globe with these different platforms, you are also expanding coverage in things that we didn't think about 20 years ago, including equity reporting, climate reporting, all of these access to things. And we have someone asking about what it means to capture diversity and diverse voices in covering this complex city of Boston.
I think that there's a lot of intentionality in our newsroom right now, and just sort of in a shuffling and a reinvention of how we cover things, what our beats are. The traditional beats and how they were geographically arranged typically aren't enough. So we have our geographical beats, like we expanded into Rhode Island. We have a large bureau there. We have a bureau in New Hampshire. We're becoming this sort of super regional geographically, but then internally within, we've gone deeper into technology. We've gone deeper into education and into equity. And so it's a realization that we need to sort of be intentional in order to really service these different communities, and we have to align your newsroom to do that. But I'm glad they noticed.
That was a great answer to a complex question. I want to start, as we approach our final 10 minutes, to looking ahead a little bit. Margaret, you have a unique position because you are here in Boston, but you were recently appointed to the board of NPR, which means that you're looking nationally about what's going on. And we are entering another election cycle. Someone would say we're already full in it now. Right. I want to ask you about the difficulty of doing anything in media these days when we've had so much confrontation and, I guess, aggressive difference of opinion.
I mean, it is the prevailing question for all of us. And as we talk about the challenges for media in Boston, the same challenges hold true for NPR, and I think for any national news organization, and for Disney for that matter. I mean, media it's a challenging time right now. I think what is unique about public radio, NPR, BUR, GBH, and all of our colleagues across the country is that beyond being news organizations, we're also at some level, we reach deeply into the human head and heart. And so I think in the best way, the audio storytelling reminds us of our humanity. Mm-hmm. And there's something very powerful about that in terms of starting a national election coverage, where we're actually thinking about stories that people have to tell, understanding the biggest issues from the perspective of people across the country and hearing them. And of course, we're in text and newsletters and all that kind of thing, but it seeps into your head and your heart. There's something that Joan Didion, the great writer, used to say, which is that we tell ourselves stories in order to live, and I think that's true for all of us. And that's why we're here in some ways, to deepen human connection and sense of what we have in common, and not sense of what differentiates us.
Speaking of stories and human connection, Susan, I want to ask you about the partnerships that you have, even across the Atlantic with British television, et cetera, because a lot of people have seen the decline in, the best way to call it is traditional television as far as producing content. But producing high quality content is very expensive, and that's why you see this rise of reality TV and a demise of really beautifully and well-written stories, fiction on traditional TV. It's gone to different cable outlets. I want to ask you about that because, GBH is getting to be better known for that. But again, we're talking about things that are expensive, and people are like, oh, well, there's money there. It's public.
Well, no, well, that's very nice, but that's great. We produce Masterpiece,
Yes.
right, which is our drama series, Frontline, Nova, Antiques Roadshow, and American Experience, our history series. So these are 5 great television shows, and I again, going out across all platforms, that reach an enormous number of people. Costs on doing this, on all good work, does go up. So we are very reliant on community support, foundation support, corporate support from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and from PBS. But people think, oh, PBS just funds all that. PBS, God bless them, but they only fund half of all of those programs. So we need to be out there fundraising locally and nationally to create this terrific content that people love and that really shines a spotlight, in the case of Frontline, on things going wrong so they can be fixed, and in the case of Masterpiece, takes people to another place so they can maybe escape for a few minutes. So I love the range of that work, and keeping it going is something that we talk about 24/7.
Lynn and Linda, I want to ask you about this because, again, this is expensive business. If you want something quality, it's expensive. And what drives me nuts is that people expect quality journalism to be free. And I said, no, if you're sending people out on the streets to knock on doors and to stay up all night and write things, it cannot be free. So I would ask you, and by the way, no matter what, I get a lot of newspapers and magazines at work. I subscribe. Because I said, I want my community not to be a city that says, oh, we lost a newspaper, we lost a magazine, because that's happening a lot of different places. So Lynn, let me ask you, and then followed by Linda, about this idea that people just don't want to pay for things. Your cost for subscribing to the magazine has really not matched inflation.
No, not at all. And we're also, at the same time, trying to get people to be all-access subscribers. So we did put up a paywall a couple years ago, and digital paywall. And so after 5 pages, you're going to hit having to make a decision on whether you want to pay for the content or not, which a lot of people have done. Not city regional magazines so much, but so we're constantly testing and learning about how far we can take that. And you're right, no, people do not want to pay for this. And we stopped being really aggressive on the print side with trying to maintain our print circulation at a certain level. We've let it kind of drop to the loyalist level, if you will, post-pandemic. So it's very challenging. It's very challenging. And thus the reason that there's just more pressure on the sales revenue side and events, et cetera, sponsorships, things like that, to cover those costs.
Linda, when something big happens in the city, good or bad, they want to be able to go and read it on the Globe. But sometimes, again, they don't want to pay. And when people are frustrated by the paywall, I yell at them, pay. This person is working really hard to bring you this information. Nothing else in life is free. You're paying probably a lot more for that latte that you don't really need than you do for this access to information. But I want to ask you also about that frustration, that challenge that of the expectations out there.
I think that this is why our philosophy has been to be the best we can be, and really we see it as a challenge to prove our value. And so we invite people to try us out, and our belief with a low introductory rate, we really believe that once you spend time with us, you'll understand why our journalism is worth paying for. We are the world's leading experts on this region. The depth of experience that the journalists at the Boston Globe, Stat News have is just extraordinary. And where we have the luxury, because we are in a community that supports the Boston Globe, that subscribes to it, we have really in-depth investigative reporting that changes the city, that changes how things operate here. So it is, when I talk to other places, I'll say what you're saying is that the most important thing that you can do to support your community is to subscribe to your local paper, whether it's your local town paper or wherever it is. It really makes a huge difference in having that visibility and that support to have somebody holding your community accountable and telling the stories of what's happening in your community.
I highly recommend checking out Stat, because you think about it, everything happening in Boston is going out to the world to help keep people alive and healthy, all the biotech research and such, and this is really the vehicle that is covering it. We are down to our final few minutes, so a very quick question for each of you. I'll start with you, Linda. I love to end panels by looking forward. So you are obviously engaged in things that we would have never imagined, 20, 30 years ago, including something like this, a hybrid event where we're going over ideas. What are quickly just some things that you see in the future when it comes to media, both Boston and as we extend beyond?
I think that you're going to see, there are places that are becoming, I can't speak for their industries, but for we are, where more are becoming quote unquote super regionals, where we are not interested in becoming a national, but as there's been a decline in smaller regional places, that we're trying to fill that gap. And places like the Globe, where we have the support of the community, just relentlessly investing to better serve our readers and better serve our community. So I think that you're seeing a lot of creativity actually in news organizations right now of this, again, relentless pursuit of better serving, producing better, more trusted quality journalism.
Lynn?
Yeah, I think for us, the future is all about, continuing to make it easy to live in Boston. We're all about navigating the city and showing you the best things to do, the places to eat, where to shop, where to go on vacation, what places are the best in terms of professional services. And so I think there's always going to be a home for that. It's just going to be interesting how that evolves. And one thing that we did do is we've started an online directory called Find It Boston, and it services the top doctors, dentists, real estate agents that we editorially have recognized in the publication, finding a home for them digitally in this directory. And because of our brand authority, that is driving traffic to our site, and it's also providing a service. And we can sell enhanced listings to these professionals where they can put a bio and request an appointment into that program. So you find these things that continue to make you important to the community.
And I'm so glad I'm no longer getting the huge yellow pages dumped at the door that are too heavy to even carry out to recycling. Susan?
Well, I think on a local level, I do agree with what Linda said about becoming more regional. I think we're going to be a lot more intentional about telling stories that are here as a really local, trusted news brand, but also statewide and region-wide, working with other players in the area, including some of the folks sitting right up here on this stage. One thing we didn't talk about is how much more people are partnering and cooperating with each other, news brands, rather than just purely competing in an old-fashioned sense. Nationally and locally, it is really that digital transformation to bring us to as many people as possible, and we're just nonstop experimenting on ways to reach more audiences.
And Margaret?
I will be very fast, and because I grew up in broadcast, I'm watching that clock. We have 22 seconds left, so I'll just share something amusing. Walked into the green room, There's Susan wearing the exact same skirt I am, and Linda also wearing pleats. So I just want to say that pleats are in, and if I can be a good company. And only in a panel of women leaders would you actually talk to each other about what you're wearing. You've been wonderful. Thank you so much.
I want to thank our virtual audience for joining us. I want to thank you, all of you in the room, and amazing to get these women who are so busy. It's a miracle in itself to get everyone to convene in person like this right now. Thank you for a fascinating conversation.
Thank you.